Power Rangers is awesome. Power Rangers has cool fight scenes. When it comes to the topic of people's favorite fights from across the franchise's history, some people will bring up Forever Red. Some people will bring up the original Green Ranger arc. Some people will bring up the legendary battle from Super Megaforce. But for my money, the best fight scene in the franchise comes from my favorite season of the show, Power Rangers RPM. For those who don't know, Power Rangers RPM was the last season produced under Disney before the franchise was cancelled, and then subsequently rebought back by its original owner and creator, Hayao Saban, which led to us getting Power Rangers Samurai in 2011. But before that, Power Rangers was owned by Disney, and originally, Disney was really enthusiastic about the series, heavily promoting it during its run, but eventually started putting less and less resources in until they reached 2008. Jungle Fury was originally going to be the last season, however, Bandai helped finance and produce one additional season, Power Rangers RPM. Power Rangers RPM was the first and only season of the show executively produced by Eddie Kuzelian, who previously got his start working on the Disney series American Dragon Jake Long. In an ancient interview with Fury Diamond of Ranger Crew, Eddie stated that because this was going to be the final season of Power Rangers, he was encouraged by Disney executives to swing for the fences, and that because the show was already being cancelled, he had nothing to lose. And so, he set out to make something truly ambitious. He was inspired by classic 80s sci-fi films like Mad Max, The Road Warrior, and The Terminator, which gave us the show's iconic visual style and the idea for the show to be set in a post-apocalypse world that has been completely taken over by machines, all except for the domed city of Corinth. Power Rangers has had its peaks and valleys when it comes to what content and themes it felt comfortable portraying, but RPM was when the show was really going for the darker ideas. Death was prevalent in the show. We regularly saw enslaved and captured humans having their bodies modified to be turned into fighting soldiers, much like our Black Ranger of the season, Dylan. But the show could also be very funny, oftentimes poking fun at the more absurd elements of the franchise, and especially with some elements of its source material, as this season was based on Engine Sentai go-onger, a season that's all about cute little cartoon cars who live in Engine World with names like Carrigator and Bear RV. So instead of ignoring it, they decided to play it up a little.
What do you mean, what eyes? Right there?
The front of our Zords.
They look like...
They look like eyes.
Big, googly anime eyes.
Where do you get your spandex?
That is not spandex. The material is a self-assembling memory.
It's not normal, okay? It's a giant flying chicken that's shooting laser beams at people.
You cruise around in a giant yellow teddy bear, okay? I drive a big green fish. Look in the mirror, people. We're in no position to be sitting in judgment of anything weird.
So, what fight am I talking about today? Is it one of the epic, story-focused ones, like Tenaya vs. Dylan? Is it the debut of the Gold and Silver Ranger? Is it the final battle where they storm Vengeance's hideout unmorphed? Not quite. Those are all great fights, but they're not the one I'm thinking of. Then, could it be one of the quirkier, weirder fights, like the one from the wedding episode, or Ziggy's first fight? See, we're getting closer. My favorite fight in the franchise is actually from the 7th episode of Power Rangers RPM, Ranger Red. See, each of the main RPM cast members gets a dedicated episode to their backstory, except for Dylan, who the whole season's mystery is kind of about anyway, and since he has amnesia, he can't remember his backstory to begin with. And Gold and Silver, whose backstories are scattered across multiple episodes. We have 6 episodes that follow this naming scheme. Ranger Blue, Ranger Green, a 2-parter for Ranger Yellow, their mentor gets an episode, Dr. K, and the subject of today's discussion is Ranger Red. This episode actually came out about 15 years ago, and because of that, I wanted to showcase a little microcosm of what I love about Power Rangers. Alright, so let's get in gear. The episode begins with a cold open, showing a calm, almost too calm day at the public park. A mother is walking her baby through the park in a stroller, when from the distance, we can see the grinders are stalking them, prepared to attack. The only music we hear is the mother singing, This Little Light of Mine. A very unique decision, as very rarely does Power Rangers ever use real-world music. The grinders close in, the shrill, screeching sound of their mechanical whirring getting louder and louder through the scene, as an intense, ominous ringing grows louder. The grinders are about to strike. When?
You'll wake the baby.
The tension is at an all-time high. Rangers versus grinders, framed like an Old West showdown. However,
And if you wake the baby, I might just have to sing you all a sweet little lullaby, and then tuck you into bed without any dessert, or even a single goodnight kiss.
we immediately get introduced to the dynamic of our two Rangers, the cool and confident Ranger Red Scott, and the dopey and awkward Ranger Green Ziggy. Ziggy completely breaks the tension in the scene, and communicates to both the characters and the audience how he's new to being a Power Ranger, and Scott reminds him,
When it comes to talking, less is more.
and before Ziggy has time to let the joke stretch itself for way too long, he lets his guard down and nearly puts himself and the civilians in danger. Scott yells out to warn Ziggy, and this epic sequence begins. Scott grabs the baby carriage, and Ziggy grabs the mother, and for 3 glorious minutes, we watch the two of them protect this family. Scott using the baby carriage as a makeshift weapon, and Ziggy improvising, culminating in Ziggy taking out the last of the grinders, before slipping and falling off, requiring Scott to save him. Afterwards, Scott calls Dr. K and tells her that they lost the attack bot, and the two meet up with the other 3 Rangers who were fighting their own squad of grinders, and run to go find the bot and start the actual episode. Now, I'm sure you at home are wondering, why is this fight so special? I'm sure in your head you could probably think of 5 or 10 fights you would consider cooler or more emotional. The Rangers didn't even morph. This fight is effectively filler, but is it? Now, before we fully dive into this cold opening, I want to talk to you about what we know about these characters going into this episode. Scott is cool, calm, and collected. He was a pilot in the Air Force, and despite the number 1 on his Ranger suit, he was actually Eagle number 2. In the first episode, all we know is that he was the sole survivor of a mission gone wrong, and that Colonel Truman, the main man in charge of the military and the city, is his father.
Eagle 1 is down, sir.
Dismissed.
Oh, but Dad,
I said dismissed.
He butts heads a lot with Dylan, the Black Ranger, who is the edgy bad boy of the group with a mysterious past. Him and Scott do not get along, and Dylan is the only one to get under Scott's skin because he questions his authority and doesn't seem as married to the job as Scott is. Scott clearly believes in there being a certain way to be a ranger, and that you have to follow that code. He can have some fun and crack some jokes, but he very much believes in there being a way to do things. He cares about his mission and his team following in line. And his car.
listen to this music. 4-banger all the way. Computer chip, nitrous injection. If you scratch that, I'm gonna make you wish you never came back. Ranger Black, give me a status update now.
I'll be fine.
No, I mean give me a status update on my car.
We see these mannerisms on display very prominently in the fight scene. Well, minus his car. He makes some small jokes at the start, very action hero-like, but when the situation gets serious, he snaps into combat mode and takes over the situation. He runs in, grabs the stroller, effectively grabbing a hold of the situation, and goes for strong, direct, forward attacks. His goal is to eliminate the enemy as quickly and efficiently as possible, while also protecting the baby. Okay, we gotta apply Power Ranger science here, but keep in mind, we've had far more unrealistic baby carriage scenes in previous seasons of the show. I'm willing to let this slide because, well, first of all, it's cool, and also, it's really funny. Now, as for Ziggy, we see the exact opposite of that. Rather than actively fighting the grinders and defending the mother, he is trying to pull her away from the grinders, get her out of the fight. Mostly so that he can get out of the fight. But why is this? Ziggy is a squirrely, nervous, paranoid wreck who's regularly portrayed as someone who would prefer to take a shortcut if it means getting his goal. On its surface, he seems like the absolute worst fit to be a ranger. And that's true, he wasn't meant to be a ranger. He only got his powers because he was trying to protect the series' Green Morpher from being stolen by Venjix's soldier, Tenaya 7. he's clearly pissed off a lot of criminals in his past, as well as everyone in the prison wanting to kill him. He annoys basically everyone, especially the Ranger's mentor, Dr. K.
So, give me one good reason why the two of us can be friends.
I don't like you.
Oh.
In fact, up until this point, they all assumed he was a criminal. In Ranger Green, we see that he used to be involved in a crime family called the Scorpion Cartel. However, he used his criminal connections and sticky fingers to basically play Robin Hood with the cartel's money in order to help provide medical supplies to an orphanage in town. He risks his life and his reputation to help people in need. So despite his outward appearance and demeanor, he is still an honorable and noble man, just a very cowardly one. What's great about this fight is how we see the difference between the two Rangers' fighting styles reflects their current characterization, as well as their story arcs as of this point in the show. Ziggy only just joined the team 2 episodes ago.
Hey, yo, what the fuck?
And he's only fought one real attack bot up until now, so as he says, he's just getting used to these things. It's one thing to run from a problem, but it's another thing to fight the problem head on. Ziggy up until this point has always gotten help from another character. Dylan helped him get into Corinth. Dylan helped him get out of jail. A former member of the Scorpion Cartels clears Ziggy's name, and that convinces Dr. K to save Ziggy from getting killed by the cartel. Ziggy has not had to actively engage in combat at any point so far where he didn't have a suit to protect him or an upper hand on someone. This is all new for Ziggy. What we see from Ziggy is him gradually having to grow confidence and have to actually fight the grinders rather than run, as after a certain point, he loses a mother and needs to get her away from the grinders. We see him fight in truly cowardly, embarrassing ways, like literally kicking dirt at them, and even uses the mother herself as a weapon, twirling and flinging her around like it's a dance number. By the way, the mother is actually played by Motoko Nagino, who many of you may recognize as the pink A-Squad Ranger from Power Rangers SPD. She's also done numerous stunts for the franchise, which is probably the only reason she's able to endure all of the madness happening to her. But also, she's the wife of prolific tokusatsu stunt coordinator Koichi Sakamoto, who at this time was currently working on Power Rangers at Disney before going back to Japan and working on Kamen Rider, Ultraman, and Super Sentai itself. Koichi's stunt work has always been excellent, and this fight is no exception. The episode creates a sense of flow, suspense, and becomes an elaborate stage-like play with the way everyone is moving to a rhythm. Eventually, Ziggy starts using the playground to his advantage and hangs from the bars to attack, while also using it as another method to move the mother around the park. Once Ziggy gets confident, he starts trying to crack jokes like Scott did, only he hasn't earned that level of confidence, as in that moment he realizes he grabbed a grinder by mistake and sees the mom fleeing on her own. Ziggy runs a grinder into a pole, ripping its arm off, and at this point Ziggy is cornered and has to fight on his own, knocking the grinders off the ledge. By the end of the fight, he starts leading the mother forward and kicks the last 2 grinders through the slides, definitively taking them out.
I hope they can let that one slide because of the 2 slides that
The universe decides Ziggy still has more training to do, and he misses the railing, but Scott saves him with the baby carriage. Beyond just humiliating and humbling Ziggy, I feel like there's more to the baby carriage than what's on the surface. So, the fight is really fun, has cool music, and tells a story through its action as we see Ziggy learn to gain his confidence and learn how to be a real hero like Scott. That's cool! But is that really worthy of it being the best fight? Well, in order to answer that, we need to see how the fight plays into the rest of the episode. So, the rest of the episode is about the Rangers trying to stop their new Croc Carrier Zord, which has gone out of control, while also figuring out how to stop the attack bot. All throughout, we cut back and forth to Scott's backstory in the Air Force. We see that Scott is always protected by his father, even though he's his commanding officer. The position of second squad leader is up for grabs, upon which Marcus, Scott's older brother, has to put in a letter of recommendation. Colonel Truman doesn't believe that Scott was ready, and when Scott and his brother Marcus, Eagle 1, go to engage the attacking Vengeance aircraft, Marcus doesn't let Scott into his air zone to protect him, saying it's too dangerous. This indirectly gets Marcus killed and leaves Scott with survivor's guilt over the whole situation. This carries forward to the present day, where, in order to fix the malfunctioning Zord, Scott has to go outside the dome to recover a component from Marcus's downed aircraft, but his father refuses and says that Marcus would have refused too. Initially, Scott believes this, but after defying his father's orders, he makes his way to the crash site. He recovers the component, and after reading the letter of recommendation that Marcus wrote that was in the wreckage, he boldly tells his father that if Marcus was alive, he would have done the same thing Scott did. After the Rangers win the fight and use the new Zord, Scott leaves the letter Marcus left, recommending his little brother for the role of second squad leader for his father to read, hopefully showing his father that Scott's older brother believes in him and that he should too. So that's all well and good, but what does that have to do with the fight at the beginning? On its surface, it seems irrelevant. Maybe it is, and this whole video is just me reaching. Maybe the writers didn't actually plan to connect the two sequences. But I believe they did. Throughout the fight, we see Scott teaching Ziggy the way of the Ranger. He does a cool flip and hits a one-liner, impressing and dumbfounding Ziggy. He calls out to Ziggy to alert him when his carelessness and nonchalant nature almost gets him killed. He rushes in to break up the fight so Ziggy can get out. Throughout the fight, Scott looks over to Ziggy to make sure he's okay, and for that split second the grinders grab the baby, Scott saves the baby, but he seems visibly angry of the situation. Like, he's not just mad at the grinders, but mad at himself for letting this happen. While Ziggy probably wouldn't have died from that fall, the way it slows down to let Scott kick the stroller over to him is not just Scott looking cool and Ziggy looking like a goofball, but also a way to show Scott's split-second response to protect him. I don't think Scott views Ziggy like a brother, and I don't particularly think he's taking pity on Ziggy just because he is the new guy. Rather, I feel like Scott wants to protect his team and be a good leader, because he knows what makes a good leader from his brother Marcus, and that's the role model he aspires to emulate in his actions. In a way, Ziggy is like his own Scott, his own Eagle too. The line Dylan says to Scott after the carrier Zord goes rogue is,
Well, fearless leader, what now?
and that's the thing that gets Scott to remember what happened in the past, what happened to his leader, Marcus. Scott is the leader of a whole team now, and that responsibility probably weighs very heavily on him, and I'm sure all he wants is for things to go smoothly, hence he gets frustrated at Dylan for defying his orders all the time. And I'm sure due to that previous survivor's guilt, he doesn't want to lose anyone else due to his own carelessness. So overall, the scene seems to be both paying off Ziggy's previous development and also setting up Scott's arc throughout the episode, all while being a visually entertaining, weird, wacky, off-the-wall sequence. It's that layer of detail in these episodes that make RPM such a beloved favorite of mine. What are some of your favorite fights from across the Power Rangers franchise? Let me know down in the comments below. And thank you guys so much for tuning in. I decided to try something a little bit different with this video, and if you guys like it, I would love to do some more. I have a couple other ideas kicking around in my brain for some smaller scale content while I'm still in the middle of working on my larger scale, big retrospective videos. So I hope you guys enjoy, and I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. Thank you. Thanks to all my super mega fans. Super mega Jim Bevan.